Thank you
I'm
so much for
Evelyn.
listening.
And I'm Robert.
I have been
And we have a
Robert.
special
And
guest
I have been
today.
Evelyn.
Podcasters are
I'm
Robert and
Cormack,
Evelyn Lewis.
coming in from
Edited by
Scotland.
Evelyn Lewis.
And we're talking
Produced
about it.
by Robert Lewis,
All right.
Evelyn Lewis,
well, Mike,
Regina,
thank you so
and
much for being
Comet
on the
Canary.
podcast. We really appreciate
Music
it.
provided by Ben
No
Sound.
problem.
Link in
Thanks
the
for having me
description.
on.
Support us on Patreon at Talking About It
We're going to be
Podcast.
doing the chapter.
Follow
The
us on
Bridge of
Facebook and
Khazad-dum,
Instagram at
and
Talking About It.
you had
And
requested
Twitter
to
at
do this
Token
chapter.
Pod.
So I was going to
Thank
ask
you all again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
What your journey through Lord of the Rings is and why you chose this chapter.
Okay, so, well, I first read the book when I was in grade 7, or primary 7 as we would say. So when I was about 10 years old, my dad had recommended the book to me. He was one of those guys who had read it when, way back, I guess it would have been the 60s that he read it. He was one of those guys that was big into Pink Floyd, Tolkien, all the great classic rock sort of music. So he passed all that stuff down on to me, which was great. You know, when you're 10, 11 years old, you feel so far ahead of everyone else taste-wise.
Right.
It just took a long while for everyone else to catch up, and you just feel a bit in a minority. But you know, now everyone's caught up, and it's great. This is the culture now.
Right.
Yeah. So I have literally read the book once a year since then. So we're talking about 1990. So I must have read it 30 times.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I think I've probably read it that many times since 1979.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
got him beat.
Yeah, and as for this particular chapter, The Bridge of Khazad-dum, it is just an immensely exciting chapter, and I love what you might call the dynamic contrasts within the whole Moria segment, the quietness, the stillness, the creepiness of the underground pit that is Moria, and then the overwhelming action sequence that comes, and the immense body of the Balrog, and the clash between it and Gandalf is just immense.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, to put it mildly.
There you go. So, I guess, do you want to give us a quick summary?
Well, first of all, what were your predictions?
Oh, that's right. So I make predictions every chapter since this is my first time reading the books with my dad. So my predictions were we would find out what Khazad-dum meant, and that this is the part where Gandalf says, "You shall not pass."
Right.
Because my only background knowledge is the movies.
Okay.
So that's what I predicted. I don't think I made a third prediction.
I don't think you did either.
Yeah. So you want to give us a quick summary about what it was?
About the
Chapter as a whole?
About the chapter as a whole, well, they finally get into Khazad-dum, which is one of the many names this place has. It's the oldest and greatest of all, and they call them mansions.
Yeah.
So you think of this place as a mansion, really boggles the mind, because it's really more about the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Balin had gone and searched for it because it had been lost for a while. Yeah, like I do the finger thing like people on the radio can hear me.
Right, in this audio format.
Yeah. They find their way in. They find out what happened to the previous party that went there looking for it. And then they realize maybe that they had dug a little too deep and woke something up that shouldn't have been woken up.
All right.
So.
All right, ready to get into the chapter?
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
All right. So the chapter really starts off right on the heels of this last chapter where they are staring at Balin's tomb.
Right. Now, who is Balin?
So if this is your first episode listening, we've talked about Balin a few times. He was one of the dwarves that went on the quest with Bilbo and the Hobbit, and he went in search of this great place where they are now.
Right. So do you have anything special to say about Balin, or?
Well, it's sort of interesting because the segment, the moment where they reached Balin's tomb in the Lord of the Rings was a point where Tolkien actually stopped writing for about a year. Like the well had run dry, he had paused. He didn't really know where he was going with it, and so there's almost like a release of immense amount of creative energy that comes afterwards, I think.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. The, what he is writing definitely finally takes a turn. We're getting away from all the knowledge dump into some action finally.
Yes.
And yeah, Balin was one of the dwarfs that went on the thing went on the adventure in the Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, to take back the Lonely Mountain. Also, if you remember during the Hobbit, Balin's usually the person who's put on watch.
That's right.
Because
Yeah.
he's very observant. So no wonder he would want to go and find something.
Mm-hmm. So they see Balin's tomb, but they're still looking for signs of others. And as they're looking around, there's a couple doors, and they see both bones and broken blades around it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they eventually find a book that has both dwarvish, human, and elvish writing in it. And we start to learn a little bit about what happened.
Right. Yeah. So before we start getting into that, is there anything about what they find here that you?
Especially about the book, or the Book of Mazarbul, it's called.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tolkien's initial intention when publishing The Lord of the Rings was that the book would be stained and look as though it would be to give the impression of how the book would be in the actual text of Lord of the Rings, but they had to, the publishing industry wasn't quite up to it in those days.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually wrote out in hand what those 3 pages would look like, and then he stained it with wine, chopped it with a knife, so they could hoping they could take a picture of it and put it in the book. But what's really cool is the first time they ever published it in a book was the 1995 Croatian language version.
Oh.
And
okay.
The time we ever got a chance to see it, it was in the 1977 calendar, Lord of the Rings calendar. It's the first time we saw the actual images.
Gotcha.
Now, yeah, and then finding the bones by the door is kind of reminiscent of what they find when they get to the Lonely Mountain.
That is true. I didn't even think of that.
So it's kind of a callback to that.
Yeah.
Even though Gandalf's the only one in that party that would have known what that looked like, everybody's done.
Yeah. Just talking about the book again, I felt like I could see it when I was reading it.
Yes.
I really appreciated Tolkien's dedication to imagery in that moment, and his over detailed work, which I've complained about a little bit before, but I definitely appreciated it here, because I felt this entire chapter, I felt I could just see it in my mind.
Yeah, it was right. It was more detail about what everything looked like and what was going on.
Yeah.
Instead of it being an information dump.
Right.
And even the book itself could have been an opportunity for him to just give us another big information dump, but.
Yeah, which I'm glad it wasn't.
Yeah, this one has a really fast-moving narrative. This one is perhaps more what people think about when they think about sword and sorcery, because the action in it is probably the greatest peak until we get to like the great battles in the third book.
Okay.
And
Not to give it away.
I also find it interesting that Ori wrote in Elvish characters.
That's right. Yeah, they mentioned that he really preferred to write in Elvish. Which, do they ever explain why? Or
it kind of hints that it's faster to write.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it also implies that there was greater interchange between the dwarves and the elves than there has been later.
True. So the book goes on to kind of explain a little bit about what happened to the party and the fate of Balin and the others. We learned that Balin declared himself Lord of Moria, but that title only lasted not even 5 years.
Yeah, not quite 5 years, right?
Just a little less than 5 years, where he was killed by an orc. And we see them mentioning the orcs as well with, they're just cleaning out the caverns, just so many orcs. And it just keeps getting more rapid and rapid, the entries saying more people are dying, more orcs are coming. And then there's this like ominous thing towards the end where they're like, there's something else here.
Right.
And it's a very eerie ending. It's like, it's coming.
Right. And one of the things I find interesting is that Gandalf reverently gives the book into the care of Gimli.
Yes.
Because Gimli is the son of Gloin, who was on the
original
adventure, and he's a nephew of Oin.
Mm-hmm.
So.
But also, that's Gimli's original mission, was to find out what happened to Balin. That's how he came to the journey in the first place.
So let's get that one out of the way right away.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about it anymore.
True.
Yeah, can tick that one off.
That's right.
Yeah, so Gandalf is at least happy that it's like, this explains where they are in the caves, so he knows the way out now.
Right. Yeah.
So it's almost a glimmer of hope until the drums start.
Right.
What do you think about the way he introduces the drums and the other noise?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's the intimation. It's extremely ominous, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And also, because we know about this grim final stand, it so much adds to the tension of what we know. If it was just a series of orcs coming in, it would not have the same impact at all.
Yeah.
Right. And I love the fact that how he writes out the sound of the drums. Doom. Doom.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes wonder if it kind of reminds me, if you know about Macbeth, when the knocking at the door.
Yeah.
Right.
It's kind of like that. It's the feeling, somehow gives you that ominous, creepy feeling that there's something knocking. It's like fate is knocking and it's coming at you and it's gonna fuck you up.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and also, during this huge place, and I'm sure it's just reverberating off all the walls. Yeah. Can't quite tell where it's coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
So while the drumming is starting off kind of slow, suddenly there's orcs everywhere.
Right. And then this is where we start getting a little bit more information about the personalities of some of the characters of the Fellowship. Legolas just says, they're coming.
Right.
Gimli says, we cannot get out, which is interesting that he's the one who's already being the pessimistic, yes. And then Gandalf goes, we're trapped. It's like, oh crap, Gandalf says we're trapped. We're really
right.
we're really
yeah.
Now.
Yeah, but he says, but I was not here. They did not have me here, so I'm going to sort this out.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And then I noticed something right here that I don't know if it's important or not, but Strider is officially being referred to as Aragorn.
Aragorn.
He hasn't been called Strider in a few chapters now, ever since Rivendell, I think.
Right.
So everyone's referring to him as Aragorn. So I know he becomes very important, and he's the king who returns and such. So is this kind of spoiler? But is this kind of where he's accepting his fate and that his fate has finally come for him, kind of thing? Is kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah. He's no longer the Strider of Bree. He's very much Aragorn, one of the Dunedain.
Yes.
Right. And I guess Frodo is even seeing him as someone different than his friend Strider.
Right. He calls him Strider a few times in Rivendell, but since Rivendell, since the council, it's been Aragorn.
Right.
It was just something I noticed that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're reminded that Gandalf's sword and Frodo's little dagger that's big enough to be a short sword for him glow.
Right.
Because the orcs are near.
Which I think is hilarious because as far as orcs know, these swords always glow. It's just something someone pointed out to me like a couple weeks ago, and now I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah. And if you're an orc and you see that glowing, that's a pucker moment.
True.
Yep. But even when the orcs are laughing at them, how he describes their laughter is, it sounds as if the fall of sliding stones into a pit.
Yeah.
Another fantastic.
Yeah, another great image.
Yeah. We complained about his writing slightly a couple chapters ago, so I want to say now I love his writing in this moment.
Right.
Where he was breaking all of the rules before of writing, he's now kind of following the rules of action a little bit, and it's really well done. I can see everything that he's writing.
I know, can you imagine if he wrote this chapter the same way he wrote that one, the Council of Elrond. The Council of Elrond. We have a lot of the characters speaking, but it's like 3 or 4 words. It's not, Boromir, this reminds me of so-and-so, so-and-so, and that's why I'm going to blow my horn.
Oh, true, yeah.
But this is also the first time we get to see the orcs.
Yes. So all of a sudden, the orcs come out. I wrote it down. It was where did I put it?
And it's also the first time we get to see any foes other than the riders.
Yes. Yeah, we know about the orcs, but we haven't truly seen them, really until this moment. And they're terrifying. I found it. It's the Black Uruks of Mordor.
Right. Yeah.
That's where it is.
Yeah.
And, yes, and they have great strength.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you not feel there's a slightly archaic tone as well to the action, like when Frodo, is it Frodo who kills his orc, and then Aragorn says, "One for the Shire," cried Aragorn. "The Hobbit's bite is deep. You have a good blade, Frodo, son of Drogo."
Yes. Yeah, I really like that because I noticed that a lot of people kind of they do their war cries.
Yeah.
And it's very reminiscent of I guess the Norse and Anglo-Saxon mythology that Tolkien really likes.
Yeah.
And it definitely reminded me of old stories and such, like Beowulf that I've read.
Yeah. It's interesting that he asserts Frodo's patriarchal line.
Yes.
Right.
So
yeah. Yeah, and we also get the "oh crap" moment because Boromir does not only not injure him, it nicks his sword.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another.
That's a yikes.
Yep. It's like, okay, what am I going to be able to do now?
Right.
Yeah.
But then
there's also that beautiful line about Sam.
That's what I was just about to say.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, go ahead and say it.
You say it.
Yeah. Well, it's just that beautiful line about how there was a fire smouldering in his brown eyes that would have made Ted Sandyman step backwards if he had seen it. And there's that wonderful undercutting of you've got the great action, but the Hobbit sense of humor is just wonderful.
I absolutely loved it. Like, Sam has always kind of been more of a, not necessarily afraid, but a little bit skittish around everything and shy. Yeah. But in this moment, he slays an orc. He is like ready. He's got this fire in him. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I've always wondered if that's because he's finally being faced with an enemy he can see, or is it something to do with the barrel blade that he has? Because he is able to stab him because he has the barrel blade,
Okay. Yeah. That's something.
So, but he's also the only one to get injured. He gets a scratch on his scalp.
Yes.
Even though Frodo takes a spear in the side.
Right.
And everybody goes, oh no.
Yeah. So as they slay a ton of them. Gimli's swinging his axe. Legolas is shooting off arrows. Aragorn and Boromir are just taking them down one at a time. And they're finally able to get a path where they can kind of flee a little bit. And as they're fleeing, Frodo gets a spear to the side.
Right.
And they are all terrified that they killed Frodo.
And I like how Frodo is just picked up under the arm and carried.
Yeah. Aragorn just takes him out like a toddler and just like, nope, we're crossing the street.
And we also get a chance to see a little bit of Gandalf's real power here.
Yeah.
So. Yes, the attempt to close the door.
Yes.
Right. And he starts talking about it getting hot.
Yes. They've been walking for about an hour for the most part without seeing anyone again, and it's like the air is just getting thick and hot, and it's starting to worry them.
Right.
And Gandalf is talking about how something is like blocking his magic. Something is affecting his magic.
Right.
And that was kind of an oh no moment for me.
Right.
Like a big yikes, because like Gandalf's this immensely powerful wizard that we've only seen a fraction of his power, and something is like challenging him. I don't want to meet this thing.
Right. Well, and he's also saying, he also says, hopefully the sun will be shining when we get out of here.
Right.
So that, because of the light.
And then something I wrote down with Tolkien and his big symbolism with being Catholic, is this kind of like a hell symbolism?
Yeah, there's definitely a light and dark here.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of light and dark symbolism, and it definitely just kind of like, it seemed a little too on the nose, but I'm like, is this hell?
Right. Well, I mean, we get a little bit more of that here later in the chapter too.
Yeah. So they are able.
Oh.
I mean, is there anything about that first encounter that you haven't already talked about?
Well, it's a forerunner to what happens later. There's something there. So again, it's an ominous sign of what will happen later. There's something which has equal power to Gandalf. So we know that something heavy is going to go down.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so it's building up for that final conflict.
Right.
And I love how the bridge is described.
Okay.
It has no curb or rail.
So it's from Star Wars.
Yes. So that's where George Lucas got the idea. No rails.
No rails.
Yeah. So if someone managed to take the first chamber, they would not be able to go any further because it's a narrow rail. Only one person can pass over it at a time.
Right.
It's a very great strategic defense.
Yes.
Right, and I mean it's easy to take down too if you need to.
Yeah.
So they can't get any further than the Chatham. But we also see Legolas is shaken with fear.
Yeah, and I think that's the first time he's fearful. Yeah. He's been very.
It's interesting that it's him that knows that it's a Balrog.
Yes, right. Yeah, he's not afraid of the orcs, but what is he afraid of? And if he's afraid, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the description of it that's very interesting. It's almost a non-description.
Right.
You know, it's a shape, it's a power, it's almost a force field. But what's within it? It's very subjective almost. You know, you're being left to imagine it.
Right, and there's some contradiction in the description. You know, he's a beast of fire, but he opens up his dark wings.
Yes, there's a lot of contradictions when he finally shows up. It's terrifying. But I have a question. What's a Balrog?
Well,
I don't know.
Well, for Tolkien, the exact translation is a demon of might.
Demon, cool.
Demon of might. But I thought that this might be a good place for us to have a bonus episode somewhere along the line.
More about Balrogs?
Yeah, well, where Balrogs come from and so forth.
Oh.
Because they've been around since creation.
Oh, is this something that he's done in other works?
No, but he's written about it being part of yes.
Okay.
But yeah, his creation stories, Balrogs are mentioned.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
yeah, that'd be something to learn more about with a bonus episode.
Right. Yeah, but then we get the famous lines, "You cannot pass."
Which brings me to my next question. Does that count for one of my predictions? Because I specifically said you shall not pass.
Well, that's because that's what they say in the movie.
Which I think does sound better in the movie a little bit.
Yeah, it's one is a declaration and one is a mere statement.
Right.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, shall not pass sounds more forceful, doesn't it?
Yeah. Though in the book he repeats you cannot pass multiple times. Which I think gives it a similar kind of feeling of forcefulness.
Right.
And then that actually brings me to my next question. Boromir blows his horn and the orcs kind of scurry away. What was that all about? Did I miss something?
Well, that's the battle horn. That's the battle horn that they've probably heard throughout ages being blown.
Oh, so they think that like an army is about to come or something.
Yeah.
Because I mean, symbol of power.
Gotcha. That actually is very similar to Celts from those documentaries we've been watching.
Right.
That they have those crazy horn things that they'll always start blowing right before a battle starts.
Right. But their type of horn was easy to carry around, so it's just a little.
Yeah, it's an easy horn, not that like 10-foot tall thing with the tongue. It's
so. Sorry, did you notice as well how Gandalf makes this verbal challenge to the Balrog, and he's saying, "You cannot pass. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor."
Yes.
I wonder, is the flame of Anor, is that Gandalf's ring? What does he mean by that?
I have the same question. What is that?
Okay, so where did I write this down at? Yeah, so he's the welder of the flame of Anor. Anor is the Elvish word for the sun.
Okay. Flame of the sun. That's cool.
And also originally in some of the first editions, he also says flame of the imperishable. And if we read his histories, that's the fire, that's the light that begins creation.
So Gandalf wields that.
Gandalf wields that power.
How?
See, that's why you got to learn more about his order. I mean, he's been around forever.
I can see
He's
that.
not just a pure mortal.
No, he ages but slowly.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that he seems to know who the Balrog is. He calls him the Flame of Udun.
Udun, yes.
Yeah.
Which means dark pit or hell.
Mm.
So going back to what I thought, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to send you right back to hell, boy.
But yeah, this is just one of those Gandalf moments that makes me go, excuse me, what? It's like, can you explain more? And then it's not explained more.
Yeah, but he'll explain later when they find him again.
Okay, that's better. But we still won't get an explanation for, oh yeah, and I can read minds. Like, he just drops it and then keeps going on with the conversation. No one questions it.
Oh,
I'm still bothered by it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's what Tolkien called the vistas. You know, the allusions to this history, this allusions to this things that you don't quite know about, but it gives the impression of this great world that's just out of reach. You don't quite know about, but it makes such an impression upon you.
Right. Yeah, you get a small taste of it.
Yeah.
And
so, like earlier, you know, when Aragorn talks about the cats of Queen Beruthiel,
right.
Like, who's that?
Yeah.
That's what's that. And his staff is broken.
Yes.
So anybody who's played Dungeons and Dragons or any of those types of games know that, you know, a wizard breaking his staff is a huge release of power.
Right.
And if you think about how powerful his staff is,
which I don't think I can imagine.
Right.
Especially if he wields the frickin' sun. Like
the power of the sun.
It's like an explosion of a star is like what I'm imagining right now. Which leads me to the question, how do the others survive that release of power?
Right. And
especially since Aragorn and Boromir, they like jump in to try to help him. Like they're closer to him.
Right.
How do they survive that?
And one of the things I find interesting, this is one of the places where I think the movie does a really good job.
Uh-huh.
You know, so the Balrog's falling. Gandalf briefly has that smile on his face. And then that whip gets him around the leg and pulls him off as well.
Yeah.
And he's just like, fly, you fools.
Yes. I forgot about that line in the movie until I read it. And again, like I've forgotten most of the movie, but I feel like I was able to visualize the entire scene in my head, like I've been saying all podcasts, like very easily. It was just so well done.
Yeah.
It was just so well done.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, what an amazing climax here. I mean,
yes.
this great wizard, this main character who has led them all through most of book 2 is now gone.
Yeah.
He's been the guide, the lead, the one who's handled all these challenges that have been thrown up.
Right.
No.
You know, Tolkien writes in some of his Tolkien puts in some of his writings that he had to come up with some way to get Gandalf out of the story for a while.
Oh.
Or else Gandalf was going to be the rescue there throughout the whole time.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so they needed to find a way to get rid of him for a while.
Yeah, because in The Hobbit, he just disappears off from time to time.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, I got something to do over there. I'll see you later.
Yeah. So here, it's the same idea, but you can see the growth and scale of Tolkien's imagination is so much more epic.
Yes, the stakes are definitely higher.
Yeah, far, far higher. And it's just, it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And then they're run for the door.
Yes.
Just like Bilbo Baggins running for the door.
Yes, I did notice that.
So yeah, and then
there are a few orcs there, but Aragorn chops them down.
Right.
Full of rage now.
And I guess he just does it so violently and so quickly. All the other orcs are like, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
which gives them an opportunity to get out the door.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the sun is high in the sky. It's only 1 hour after noon.
Yes.
So
they're able to escape. And I love the final line, which is drum beats faded.
Yeah.
Right, but they still can hear, they can still fear the doom.
Right.
Doom. And so it's almost like letting us know that they're grieving as well.
Yeah.
So
I just thought that was a brilliant last line of the chapter.
Right.
Like a lot of chapters, I feel like end on not necessarily a cliffhanger, but with, hey, more's about to happen. I'm ready to read more. It's hard to stop reading at just the one chapter, but with this one, it was definitely a finality to it, where it's just like, this part of the adventure is over, and I'm giving you a second to just take in what just happened.
Right. Yeah, very much. It's a final, it's almost a pause for breath, isn't it? You've had so much action, and then here is just a little denouement just to appreciate this immensity of what's happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, it's you've got this person who's been around for almost ever. He's taken out.
And every time he does show up, he manages to get them out of it somehow.
Right.
And then this time, he couldn't escape.
Right. Yep.
It's terrifying. I don't know how they're going to survive without him.
Right.
Like, I don't think any of them do.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too. You know, he's kind of been their flag bearer this whole time too. You know.
Yeah. Kind of keeping them all in check. He's kind of like the dad supervising a field trip. That's what it feels like. He's the dad supervising a field trip. Where
full of a toque.
Exactly. Where you've got like the jokesters, the jocks, the princess, the geeks.
You've got the hobbits, the dwarves, the elves bickering, and he's coming in, knocking heads together and saying, come on, let's do it. Let's go and do this quest.
Yeah, he's done that several times. Every time Gimli and Legolas started, or every time Pippin and Merry are doing something dumb, he's like, guys, come on.
Let's go.
1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Like
that's it. So at some point, you've got to get the dad away, and you've got to do the thing. You've got to grow up.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
And he's actually done it in a minor way a couple of times in this chapter too. It's like, okay, we can mourn for the dead later. Let's get out of here.
True.
Type of thing. So is there anything we didn't cover or something else you want to add? Why you like this chapter so much?
No, I mean, as a chapter, I mean, as I was saying, it's really probably the most exciting in terms of action that we've had since the ones with the Black Riders early on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's been so much, as you say, information dumps, so much exposition. The Council of Elrond, which you meet so many people and takes so many risks, but there's so much background, which is really fascinating. But here, like, you really feel the pace pick up. And because you've had such an ominous previous chapter going through the quietness, to go from that, the dynamic shift is tremendous. I really feel it's something like probably a long overdue chapter. You really get some swords out. You get you're knocking heads. Great stuff.
For sure.
Right. And we also do get a little line in there as well of Gandalf saying, something about hobbits are more than what they seem.
Yes.
Frodo's more than what they seem. He said that exact same thing about Bilbo in The Hobbit.
Oh, yes.
That was something that I totally forgot to bring up that I did write down. Gandalf even says to Frodo that he reminds him of Bilbo.
There's more to him than meets the eye.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But is he talking about his personality, or is he talking about that mithril shirt?
Right.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and it's also, going back a couple of chapters, it's interesting that Bilbo ever only saw it as the shirt that he wore in his adventure.
Yeah.
Not knowing how much the thing was worth.
Right.
And now the same thing. Because that's what happened here in Moria, is that the dwarves, this is what they were mining.
Yeah.
And they got greedy and dug deeper and finally released the Balrog.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a nice ethical lesson in there, isn't there? Don't be too greedy, or you might wake up stuff that you don't want to.
Right.
Yeah.
And they also describe the watcher at the door, that critter that's got all the tentacles.
Yes.
That talks about when they tried to escape, when the orcs showed up, the water was high, and they couldn't skirt around that little pond.
Yeah.
And so they got stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
so,
one of the dwarves got taken by the Watcher, and was it Ori, I think?
Yeah.
One of them? Yeah. So, yeah, that it's a shame that I think the Jackson film makes a bit too much of it.
right.
Mm.
He tends to do his action in a very sort of flashy way.
Yeah.
But and it's the same during Moria. They go in and they immediately find the corpses of dwarves. It's like, you're giving away the whole secret. We should go through this whole spooky, ominous, tension-filled bit first before we find out what happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really doesn't seem to just follow the rules, but the way that he rewrote the rules has affected fantasy so much.
Well, but he's also talking about how Peter Jackson just
true.
broke even those rules.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I also can't, because I joke about all the time that, well, you know what the next chapter is going to be because of what it's called. So
let's see what the next chapter
so
is.
instead of this past chapter being called Gandalf Lost, at least.
Yeah, true.
So what is the name of the next chapter?
So the next chapter, if I can find it, I have it tabbed. If I can open my book.
Okay.
Lothlorien. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Lothlorien.
Lothlorien.
Right.
Cool. That gives me so many hints about what's going to happen next. I'm going to guess that that's the name of an elf.
Okay.
That they meet.
Right.
Did
you know Gimli is actually the name of an elf in the creation story?
Oh my God. Really?
Yep. So
it could be a dwarf then.
I was like,
I'm gonna go with elf. I'm gonna say they're gonna meet an elf, like they did with Glorfindel.
Okay.
And then I'm going to predict that the orcs are gonna follow them.
Okay.
And I'm gonna guess that Pippin is gonna be the one that is the most, or at least shows being the most affected by Gandalf's quote unquote death.
Okay.
I think I have some good. I think I have some good solid predictions there, purely because the chapter doesn't give anything away.
So.
Yeah, those are not pretty good guesses.
Yes.
We will see.
Right. So, Mike, where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube. Our channel is called Two Pricks Talk 80s Flicks, where myself and a good friend of mine, we talk about 80s films. So far we have looked at Creepshow by Stephen King and George Romero. We've looked at The Meaning of Life by Monty Python. We've looked at Weird Science. And we're currently working on Aliens.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, The Meaning of Life is one of my favorite Monty Python movies. Just because it's more reminiscent of their sketch comedy.
Yeah, it's much more a sketch one rather than the big narrative films like Life of Brian and Holy Grail.
Right.
Yeah. So what we do is it's a video podcast. So we match the films and the clips to what we're talking about as well. So we only manage to get one out every 6 weeks or so.
Okay.
But it's worth it.
That's okay. My friend is trying to do a Disney podcast, and they'll be on for our movie episode, actually, for Mirror Reviews, but they're having a hard time doing the war films right now from Disney, like the stuff during the 1940s and 50s. It's just finding information about it is very hard. So they're pretty much averaging probably every 4 or 5 weeks a podcast right now.
Right. Yeah. It can be tricky. Yeah. And getting all the stuff past the YouTube algorithm as well. You have to make sure that those clips are nice and short, and occasionally you still get blocked, so you have to go back and re-edit. But this is the fun.
Yeah.
Any social medias we can find you on?
We're on Twitter at Two Pricks Talk 80s Flicks. Let me just make sure. Two Pricks 80s Flicks. And Facebook as well. Just the Two Pricks Talk 80s Flicks. That's what we're going for.
Sounds good.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've been Evelyn.
And I've been Robert.
And we're talking about it.
Thank you so much for listening. I have been Robert.
And I have been Evelyn.
Podcasters are Robert and Evelyn Lewis.
Edited by Evelyn Lewis.
Produced by Robert Lewis, Evelyn Lewis, Regina, and Cormack Canary.
Music provided by Ben Sound. Link in the description.
Support us on Patreon at Talking About It Podcast.
Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Talking About It.
And Twitter at TokenPod.
Thank you all again for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.